Morning all. Sometimes I cover games for some quite funny reasons. I find an interesting picture sometimes. If you remember on this channel there was Fisher's Smile, there's a video on that. There was the classic Fisher against Botvinnik picture, which I thought, okay, I'll cover the game. Very complex Grunfeld. It turned out there was a German overnight in that game for a very complex rook and pawn ending draw. But there's another iconic picture which is actually quite topical actually, because it was between Anand and Kasparov in 1996, Geneva. I think it was the Rapid tournament of Credit Suisse Rapid, but this was a kind of Blitz playoff, I think. So it was actually 5 minutes each. Anand white, Kasparov black. And if you've been following the news recently, Kasparov, I think, made some sort of controversial comment that Anand had been losing motivation in recent years, and Anand, I think, has struck back saying, I think to the equivalent of, maybe part of that is Kasparov maybe doubts that he shouldn't have retired or should come back into the game. Maybe there's something about, perhaps he wants to come back in the game. Maybe Kasparov should come back to the game. But anyway, I think Kasparov knew Anand was a huge talent back in 1996. So let's have a look at this game. E4 by Anand. Kasparov played his usual Sicilian defence. After knight f3 we saw d6. And this is going to enter the Najdorf variation. So c takes, knight f6, a6. Very exciting start position. So exponents, the major exponents, Kasparov and Fischer. Okay, so bishop e3 was played here, which looks as though an English attack formation will be used, which you usually use against the Sicilian dragon when you sort of try and castle queenside. But black can play quite dynamically now with this pesky knight move, knight g4. Note there's no bishop b5 check to try and refute it with a queen takes g4 because there's pawn on a6. So knight g4 is actually possible and playable, and bishop g5, and now black expands on the king side and provides a sort of spot for his bishop to exert pressure across the center as well in the process. So h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, and bishop g7. So we have this seemingly nice, comfortable fianchetto, which has been accelerated by these tempo gains. So what has white got in return? He's got some light square weaknesses to exploit maybe later. Maybe across this diagonal. Pardon me, this diagonal. He's got also a pawn chain to bite on with either h4 or f4 later. Okay, so there's pros and cons of this. Bishop e2, and now we see the knight not retreating but actually being supported with h5. Why not? Okay, and now Vishy gives up his light square bishop voluntarily. He plays bishop takes g4. So after bishop takes g4, how is he going to weaken black's light squares, this light square complex, if he hasn't got the light square bishop to trade off anymore? Well, he's got different ideas. After f3 now, at least this bishop can come back quite usefully perhaps. Bishop d7, and it does so. Bishop f2. Okay, so what are these pawns doing here? And maybe h4 could help fix h5 or encourage further weaknesses. Knight c6, queen d2. And black has an active position though, and he doesn't have to. Now after queen d2, he doesn't actually have to defend this pawn. Kasparov doesn't defend this pawn. So let's try and see why. So knight e5 was played. Possibly it looks as though intuitively that bishop h6 is really dangerous. For example, queen takes, bishop h6. Where's the queen going? This looks like a major trap actually. Well, queen side castling's ruled out. If takes, then there's bishop d2 check. So maybe this is the point. Let's actually just quickly engine check this possibility. Queen takes g5, bishop h6 plus 5 So let's have a look. Queen h4. Oh, ouch. Knight g6. Now if queen takes h5, there is bishop d2, or even stronger, I think. Bishop d2 check, or even knight f4. But now here, if queen g3, h4, and the queen has to give itself up, it's trapped. That's a pretty nasty trap for a 5-minute game, wouldn't you say? Knight e5. So okay, g4. Sorry, after castles, Anand castles seemingly into a ready-made attack here, supported by the rook. He's got the bishop pair as well. It seems as though black's got a very pleasant position. Kasparov plays g4, and he's still got the possibility of this bishop h6 now lurking over white. So f4, kicking the knight, and maybe not minding this pin. Maybe something can be done about that here. This pin, I'm not entirely sure what. Because bishop e3 does knight c4. Let's have a quick look at this pin as well. So if bishop h6, maybe knight f5. Knight f5, yeah, that's a reasonable move. And you get the e4 square if black takes. So there's some it's better for white. It looks better for white. Technically it's better for white. So knight c4 here, queen e2, offering b2, but of course there'd be a rebound on b7. Rook c8. Now, interestingly, b3, okay, and the c-file looks a bit vulnerable. Knight a3. So the knight is now hanging. So Vishy plays knight d5. But hold on a sec. You know, this knight's also, you know, coordinating with the rook, and it's only that knight defending c2. So what's going on here? e6, kicking that knight again. Knight b4, and now queen a5, very unpleasant, surely. How is white coping with this knight? He defends it seemingly awkwardly with queen e1. On the bright side, both knights are now defending c2, so that's cool. But h4, and is white getting overloaded? You know, he can't, you know, do anything about that. The bishop's eyeing on d4. So look at this huge pressure black has, Kasparov has, and you know he's got the choice, luxury choice of g3 or h3. In fact, after bishop e3, well that sort of means that queen takes g3 might be on the cards, and hitting g7. If bishop takes, then hitting h8. So maybe g3 was kind of discouraged, because actually Kasparov played h3, and he secures a fawn pawn here. This fawn pawn, Thorn, fawn pawns. That's a funny one from the channel. Sorry, I couldn't resist. There's a fawn pawn on h3. It's very dangerous later. g3. Okay, so knight. So how is this light square complex going to be used later? You can imagine a queen would be quite dangerous later. g2 could be a liability later. But at the moment it doesn't seem like there's any big deal at this very moment. Knight b5, putting more pressure across this diagonal. Rook d1. Okay, but now knight c3. This knight's a real nuisance. It's now hitting the rook and a2. But it's pins now with knight d3. It's pins against the queen. Queen c7. But now, isn't Kasparov winning a pawn? He's still threatening to win a pawn. And, you know, if rook a1, the knight's also hitting, of course, e4 now. So this looks clearly to be winning a pawn. Remember, it's only a 5-minute game, though, so these things happen. So it looks as though white was under pressure there. And Kasparov is just simply winning a pawn. Knight takes e4. But it's a 5-minute game. Not even the best of the best can sometimes control the events of a 5-minute game. In fact, you know, Anand said in Chess Base magazine after the event, he was more concerned with playing bad moves quickly rather than trying to play good moves slowly. So that was Anand's priority. So f5 does secure, f5 does mean that maybe f5 from black would secure the knight, so that's ruled out at least with f5. And also a slight dislocation of these pawns. If this pawn was ever attacked, that could be more vulnerable if it's not supported. So e5, okay, but is this pawn vulnerable? We see now f6 actually being moved immediately. So why did this happen? Why f6? And it's giving up 2 pawns now, in fact, after knight takes f6. The idea, it seems, is knight f5, but was there a quick... Let's just quickly look at this position. Did Anand have any amazing choice here? It seems knight e2's a bit of a miserable thing, because maybe, okay, maybe, you know, maybe even f6 and bishop h6 later. Let's have a quick look at that. If the knight had simply retreated, in fact, f6 best of the worst, but knight e2, b5, a5, these are all good moves. Rook h5, even attacking f5. Rook h5, actually, let's ask the question about that pawn immediately. It's probably just gaining the pawn anyway. So the way Anand gave up the pawn was probably the most favourable. He at least got the f5 square when he played f6. So it's not ideal being 2 pawns down against Kasparov, but it's only a 5-minute game. Knight f5, and bonus, he's getting the light square bishop, which means that these light squares are potentially weaker around black's position. So bishop takes, rook takes, but now, horrible, crude but effective move, queen c6. The fawn pawn is being made use of here, g2 under fire. The mate threat is parried, but now a nasty pin with queen e4, and it looks as though the pin can be further made use of, but perhaps with knight d5 or bishop h6. Nasty pin. Okay, so against this, and also of course the rook is attacked, and this would be very unpleasant then. Rook f1, say knight d5 or bishop h6, so it drops back to f2. So at least bishop h6, at least the queen's like protected here. Okay, but knight d5 is also perhaps possible, as well as bishop h6, because bishop h6, rook takes f6. There's bishop. Surely there's bishop takes e3 check here, crashing through. Well, it looks pretty dangerous anyway. But knight d5 looks strong as well. So knight d5 was actually played. Rook e1, so 2 pawns up. Kasparov could have just simply swapped things off here, simplified, with knight takes e3. Now he did try and simplify anyway with his next move, but he didn't play knight takes e3, which would absolutely force simplification and simply 2 pawns up. But no, he played it like this. He played queen takes e3, which carries a weakness of the last move. So that concept, the weakness of the last move, even the best players of all time fall for the problem of the weakness of the last move. In fact, you can literally a recent idea I have for visualizing weakness of the last move. If you look at the last move of the opponent as a rectangle, and there's a plus and minus, like imagine the plus is here, and the plus implications, it's pinning the rook, it's going to exchange queens, it's on here, but the minus is that part of the rectangle is what it was doing. It was protecting g4, it was protecting maybe other squares, it was protecting d5. So you can look at the last move as a kind of rectangle concept. You know, that say a knight moved there, the positive aspect, like battery, a positive and negative, is that it's hitting these squares. The negative is that the knight was away from defending its squares. So every move has a positive and negative. You can visualize it almost like a plus and minus of a battery. So this queen takes e3. The minus is it's not defending g4. And this was observed by Vishy, and here we get our iconic picture, because not only, okay, g4 is loose, it's very advantageous to take it here. Bang, queen takes g4, and we have the iconic picture of Kasparov raising, going backwards in his chair in amazement, stunned amazement and shock and kind of disgust, maybe, horror, that he'd missed this move. He was 2 pawns up after all. He was expecting a simplification, and now bishop's not been routinely recaptured, and worse, the queen is not able to take the rook. The knight on d3 is doing a good job, so the queen's actually attacked. This rook's attacked. Oh dear. Okay, so what does Kasparov do here? He seems to play a very good practical move. He castles, he gives up his queen. Basically, he's just taking the bishop, so it'll be a rook and bishop. Was there anything better? Let's just engine check this position than giving up the queen. Castling is actually one of the best moves here. If he moves his queen back, queen takes c8, this isn't so hot. King e7, I know the rook's like protected here. Knight f6, white's better here, but knight f4 is also marking out white's domination of the position. So what he played was perhaps one of the better moves, to castle, and the advantage isn't so big according to Houdini. It's about a pawn here, pawn, depth 14, pawn only. Amazing. Rook takes e3, and it's going to start to look really, really scary now for white, even though he's like a queen up. But anyway, he takes away the fawn pawn. That fawn not around his king anymore. Fawn in the side. Knight takes c2, crushing down the c file though after taking that. Queen d7. Now the knight's very strongly centralised. In some past classic games, Kasparov has given up exchanges to get a beautiful knight like that in, say, King's Indian positions. But here, queen takes b7, okay, keeping an influence on f7, and maybe, a6 is also literally on pre, because otherwise 2 connected pass pawns, thanks very much, coming down the board. So a5 is played, and now Vishy plays king g2, coming away from naughty knight checks, say, but the queen's covering checks anyway at the moment. Rook c3. Knight retreats to b2. It can reroute maybe to c4 to attack d6, to attack f7. Where else is the knight going to go? It hasn't got that many squares, so this rerouting looks like the most aggressive rerouting possible. Okay, knight c2, and it looks as though this horrible knight is centralizing with check. Knight c4, and now d5. Horrible move to face in the 5-minute game. If it takes, horrible check, winning the queen. Okay, so the knight has got an aggressive square though, knight d6, coordinating an attack on f7 now. Knight e3 check, and the king finds a safe haven, democracy on h3. Otherwise, white could get mated here. Look, king g1 mating. That would be really embarrassing. So it's good to have king h3 here. The wrath of Kasparov after he's not going down without a fight here. Rook and bishop for queen. Okay, so was it rook and knight for queen? Okay, so f5, and it looks as though the king is in big trouble here. If Vishy plays one casual move, he could be dead here. He's got to stop stuff like this. Imagine the rook here, the knight's cutting off the exit route. Vishy plays queen d7. So here, okay, let's have a look. Why is rook f6 not possible? Kasparov played f4. I wonder why rook f6 is not possible. Is it to do with queen e8 check? No. There's a move here. Analysis. Forget queen e8. It's just equal. Knight takes f5. and that gives actually white g4 square to work with. So say knight takes, rook takes, you know, check, there's king g4 here. So that knight takes f5 is the idea. Very, very clever, and shows what a remarkable, you know, speed of calculation Vishy has. That this menacing f5, a lot of us would have lost to it, come on, in a 5-minute game against Kasparov. You know, rook f6 or maybe just had to go for a draw here, but no. Okay, Kasparov can't play rook f6, he plays f4, and then we have this check, king h7, and it's still kind of dangerous here. Certainly you don't want to take this and allow these lateral checks, for example, but Vishy plays knight f7, and now he's got a menacing, you know, threat of knight g5 check, king moves, and then maybe queen g6, for example, and Kasparov sacrifices the exchange, so it's more clear cut now. Is the storm still there though? Rook c6 coming round this side to deliver a mate. Okay, but an escape square is created for the king. G takes f4, creating g3 now. It still looks dangerous though a little bit, but is black technically busted here? Kasparov plays rook f6, and then we see queen c7. Okay, now e4, which cuts off, you know, an escape route like this. So these two squares are being cut off now. So again, this rook h6, you know, isn't that really dangerous for a perpetual check or something? But this is extinguished. This perpetual check idea is extinguished now with f5, depriving Kasparov of the g6 checking square, you know, after h6. d4. Now we see queen e7 hitting the e4 pawn. So black's under real pressure now. And also, of course, also e5 is under protection if that bishop was unpinned ever. But for the moment the bishop's pinned anyway. Check, king g3. The rook is helpfully stopping knight takes f5, otherwise that would have forked queen and king here. Knight d1. Now rook f4, and there's a very, very nasty final move coming up after e3. This pawn is not given a chance. Rook g4, no defense. And here Kasparov quickly shakes hands and storms off. But we did get an iconic picture from this game. It's just the reason I'm annotating it. It was only a 5-minute game. Very exciting 5-minute game though in the Sicilian. And in a variation I think many of us would be scared to play as white. Let's have a look in overview and summary. This variation on the Najdorf with bishop e3, I think many of us don't like this knight g4 business, because it does seem to accelerate black's fianchetto, and it seems, you know, Anand I think has played some key games even with Gelfand in this line, but sometimes they seem a bit shaky as white. You know, some very, very technical, high-tech moves needed to be played, and those were like long games to survive sometimes against the dynamic pressure of black. So this is a scary line in any case. But in this game, this kind of fawn pawn was installed on h3, and it looked, you know, very, very unpleasant for a 5-minute game to be under such pressure. Knight c3 was actually forking rook e4, a2, attacking the knight. You know, quite a few functions of knight c3. So winning the first pawn, once the knight is unpinned away from the pin. So it's now still forking e4, a2, d1. So one pawn down. Now Vishy goes for 2 pawns to maximise his chances and counterplay with f6. So at least he weakens those light squares, which gives him a shot later. That light square bishop, remember, it was holding up this diagonal in g4, and we see that later that plays a crucial role in the weakness of the last move existing. The very existence of that weakness of the last move is created because black is theoretically a bit looser on this diagonal, a bit looser on the light squares. So just an imprecise move here with queen takes e3 gives Vishy the chance to make that a bishop sacrifice with queen takes g4. Now 3 pieces attacked here, queen, bishop, rook, and now Vishy's in with a shot, but still not without some problems to solve here. But he coordinates beautifully first on f7 with a beautiful knight rerouting. Then he has to escape these menacing threats, which he does so beautifully with queen d7 to hold on, give access to that h6 square for rook f6. Knight takes f5, and now in this phase he forces an exchange sack from Kasparov. What else is there? But this exchange sack, may be designed for this, to try and at least get perpetual check. But this is stopped now with g takes. It's giving white just in time the escape squares with the king. So an amazing 5-minute game, amazing quality, really, of resources and finding resources and keeping things alive by both players. I believe in the event Vishy won this Credit Suisse Rapid Masters 1996. It was in his Wiki career history, one of his events that year he won. I hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube, and check out the iconic pictures and the video footage. I'll try and reply to one of the video footage links, which is on YouTube. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.